Greetings, Paul Deeds here. If you've watched any of my other videos or a couple of my other videos, you know that I spent some time in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan between 1995 and 2001 or so, about 6.5 years, living off-grid, homesteading. And my original plan moving to the UP was to see how close to self-sufficiency I could become. I didn't have a real clear idea of what that was, or what that meant, how close I'd be able to get, anything like that. I was giving it a shot, you might say. And I can also say I learned a lot. I'm of the opinion, after my experience, my 6.5 years of doing it, that self-sufficiency is something that you have to decide for yourself what it is to you. Because no one, literally, in my opinion, no one is totally self-sufficient. We all depend on somebody else for something. Unless you go naked into the woods and survive, you're dependent on somebody for something. Even if you're using hand tools, the handle breaks. What are you going to do? You're going to have another handle for it. Unless you can make it yourself, in which case you're going to use tools to make the new handle. So those tools came from somewhere. So you see what I'm saying? In the extreme, or maybe extreme isn't the right word, the bottom line, shall we say, is that no one does it alone. And that's just my opinion. And I don't mean that to be discouraging in any way to anybody that's thinking about doing this, or anybody that's doing it and is feeling self-sufficient. That's great. As far as you take it, that's fine. I'm not discouraging that at all. It's far better than being dependent on everyone, in my opinion. Like I say, it's all my opinion and what I learned from my experience. Everybody else's experience is going to be different. There are tons and tons of videos out there about how to be self-sufficient, or should I say how to be more self-sufficient. That's not what this is. This is not a how-to. This is just my opinion from my experience. And my experience is that you have to decide for yourself the level of self-sufficiency that you're comfortable with. And that changes over time. Some things you'll become more self-sufficient in, and some things you'll become less self-sufficient in. And again, that's my experience. Somebody else's experience will be different, and that's fine. It doesn't make either one invalid. So I would say the biggest thing is making these decisions for yourself. Decide what your level of self-sufficiency is, what you want it to be, and take it one step at a time. That's all you can do. That's what I did. I shouldn't say that's all you can do. That's what I did. Start where you can, take it in steps as you go, and do what you can, do what you want to do. When I was living in the woods, I heated with wood, cooked with wood, did everything with wood. I didn't have any auxiliary heat in the house, any fallback heating system. Some of my friends did have a gas furnace or gas heater of some sort to fall back on. One of the drawbacks of my system of only heating with wood and only having that system for heating the house is in the winter, you can't leave for any length of time. I mean, it was perfectly fine to stoke up the wood furnace in the basement and run into town, run and do laundry, whatever you needed to do. And then when you came back, it would still be warm and there'd still be fire and whatnot. But as far as going away, even for a weekend, couldn't do it. Had to stay at home. So you might consider that a hardship or not. Maybe that's a benefit of it. It depends on your outlook. It worked for me. It was fine with me. Might not be fine for you. I also had an ice box. I had to depend on ice for my refrigeration. Ice has to be made. In the winter, that's not a problem. In the summer, it is. Some people that I knew in the similar situation had a gas refrigerator, but I didn't want to have LP in the house. I didn't want to have gas in the house. I didn't want to have to depend on gas. The electricity I had was from solar panels, but I also had a generator. So if you think about that, as far as being self-sufficient goes, the generator I had ran on gas. So I had to have gasoline. I depended on the gas station for the gasoline. And I didn't provide all my own food. I gardened and hunted and those sort of things, but I like a little variety in my food too. I like to eat. So I spent money at the grocery store. I grocery shop just like everybody else does. So I depended on the grocery store. In getting to the grocery store, I had a truck that ran on gas, had to have the oil changed, et cetera, et cetera. Had all the same expenses that everybody does on a vehicle. So I had the same dependencies on other people's in that area. I didn't have an electric bill, and maybe I didn't spend as much on groceries as other people did that didn't grow their own, but it was still a dependency. I still had a level of dependency on other people. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that at all. Not at all. I'm just saying that as far as self-sufficiency goes, there's a level of self-sufficiency. And like I've said before, you have to decide what level of self-sufficiency satisfies you. One of the main things I learned doing my shtick in the Upper Peninsula was that you have to stay flexible. You have to be willing to change. If something's not working, you have to be willing to change it to something that does work. And you have to go in understanding that not everything is going to work out the way you planned it. I guarantee you that. At whatever level you're starting at, the plan will go awry. And that's, for me, that's part of the fun. Part of the adventure is not knowing for sure what's going to work and what's not going to work. That's part of the fun in doing that, to me. You may feel differently, and that's okay too. And you can live off grid, without the power company and be really comfortable. And that's another thing, you have to decide what really comfortable is. I mean, you could have a one-room shack in the woods and an outhouse like Ted Kaczynski. And if that satisfies you, great. You might prefer an inside bathroom. That's okay too. You might like a certain level of luxury, and if you have the means to afford that, great. Well, I didn't have electricity. Like I said, my electricity came from solar panels and then the generator occasionally. So when I started out, I had vision. I like to read a lot. And when I started out, I had visions of reading in the evenings by oil lamp in front of the fireplace. That's pretty good vision. I like the sound of that. I like the looks of that. I like the feel of that. I couldn't read by oil lamp. They just don't, the ones I had, old-fashioned, typical chimney oil lamps, didn't provide enough light for me to read comfortably. So if I wanted to read, I had to run some electric lights, either off the batteries or off the generator. That was an adjustment. I mean, there's all kinds of adjustments like that go on when you're living off the grid, and they're daily occurrences. And as far as the cost of self-sufficiency, there are huge variables in that regard as well. I mean, if you have the means to buy a big chunk of property and have a nice house built on it and buy everything you're going to need to get started and start with everything, that's one thing. And that's fine if you can do it. If that's what you want to do and you can do it, that's great. But if you don't have the means to do something like that or don't want to do it that way, there are other ways to do it. You can have a smaller piece of property, build your own cabin, start with what you have, do as much as you can, and take it a step at a time to get where you want to be. And where you want to be, like I said earlier, will change. With your experience, you'll decide what things you're willing to give up, what things you're not willing to give up. And again, this is all from my experience. Other people will experience it differently. And again, that's okay. My biggest takeaway is, it's not even a takeaway, it's a philosophy. My philosophy in general, and life in general, is that it's your life. It's my life. I'm going to do what I want to do in my life. You only get one shot. You only get one shot unless you're a believer in reincarnation or some other philosophy. So you get one shot. So do it the way you want to do it. And don't let anybody tell you don't do it, or you can't do it, or you shouldn't do it. If it's what you want to do it. However you can. Start wherever you can and progress however you can to get wherever you want. That sounded pretty philosophical. I'm no philosopher, believe me. So if you're considering a different lifestyle, don't be discouraged. I had 6.5 years off-grid homesteading, and I loved it. Circumstances ended it for me, but at least I had my 6.5 years and I loved it. Some days were really, really hard, and some days were really, really discouraging, but I wouldn't change any of it. The hard days were really worth it. If you have any questions about what I experienced or any questions about my experience in the UP, feel free to ask them in the comments. I'll answer everything that I can as honestly as I can from my experience. And if you're inclined, you can check out my other videos on homesteading on my channel page. I'll put a link at the end here to one of them. You can find the other ones if you're interested. And I'll mention again that I'm not really looking to be monetized here on YouTube, and I don't know how the algorithms and all that business works. But if you hit the like button, if you subscribe, the videos might find their way in front of somebody else that might be interested, or you might be able to find your way back to them if you're inclined. So I'd appreciate that too. And in the meantime, go for it. Peace and joy.